Ladies and gentlemen, let me start with something that might sound a little backwards. When someone attacks your character, when someone questions your choices, when someone tries to drag your name through the mud, your first instinct is to defend yourself, to explain, to prove them wrong. When someone challenges you, criticizes you, or misunderstands you, your natural instinct is to jump in and explain yourself. You want to make sure they see your side, to correct the false image they've painted. It's human nature. We all want to be understood. But when you rush to defend yourself, you hand over something far more valuable than an explanation. You hand over control. Because in that moment, you're no longer operating from a place of confidence. You're reacting. You're trying to manage their perception instead of standing firm in your truth. Defending yourself can feel like taking action, but in reality, it's often a reaction born from insecurity. Think about it. When you know you're right, when you know your intentions are good, when you're grounded in who you are, do you really feel the need to explain? No, you just move forward. But when doubt creeps in, when fear whispers that maybe people won't understand you, peers, that's when the urge to defend appears. The moment you step into that defensive position, you're placing someone else in the position of power. You're saying, your opinion of me matters more than my peace. And confidence doesn't come from convincing others. It comes from being unshakable, even when others don't agree. That doesn't mean arrogance or dismissing feedback. It means knowing the difference between someone offering perspective and someone pulling you into a fight for validation. When you defend yourself against noise, you give energy to what doesn't deserve it. You turn a whisper into an argument. You take something insignificant and inflate it by showing that it has the power to move you. Bland. It's not easy to stay calm when someone questions your motives or distorts your words. You want to clear your name, set the record straight. But remember, people who are committed to misunderstanding you will always find a reason to twist your words. No explanation will satisfy them because their goal isn't clarity, it's control. The only way to win that game is not to play it. When you don't engage, when you stay calm, you take away their ability to pull you off balance. Dandy. Control is power, and power doesn't shout. Power doesn't rush to defend itself. It's measured, composed, intentional. When someone throws negativity your way and you don't react, it unsettles them because they expect emotion, they expect fire, they expect you to fight for their approval. When you don't, it forces them to face their own insecurity. It shows that their opinion doesn't define your reality. The people who are truly confident don't waste time proving their worth. They let their consistency, their actions, and their results speak for them. You don't see a tree defending itself when the wind blows. It stands tall, it bends a little, but it never explains why it's rooted where it is. That's what true confidence looks like. It's quiet strength, it's self-trust. It's the ability to stay centered when everything around you tries to pull you into chaos. When you feel misunderstood, take a breath before responding. Ask yourself, am I trying to protect my integrity, or am I trying to control their opinion? One comes from strength, the other comes from fear. When your motives are pure, your behavior will reflect that, no matter what people say. You don't need to argue your goodness, you just need to live it. Time has a way of making truth undeniable. Defending yourself often feels urgent in the moment, but urgency is a sign of emotion, not clarity. The more emotional you become, the more reactive your response will be. And that's when you lose control. Confidence requires restraint. It's knowing that you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to answer every accusation. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you're secure enough to let others talk while you continue to live your truth. When you stop defending yourself, you start preserving your energy for what really matters. You redirect it from convincing others to improving yourself. You move from reaction to creation. You stop playing defense and start playing offense in your own life. That's where true growth begins. Every moment spent explaining who you are to people who don't want to understand you is a moment stolen from becoming who you're meant to be. Yeah. Control isn't about having the last word. It's about not needing one. When you don't defend yourself, you communicate something powerful without saying a thing. You show that your peace is not for sale. You show that you know who you are, and that's enough. You show that your self-worth doesn't depend on someone else's version of your story. And once you understand that, no amount of criticism can shake you because you no longer give anyone the authority to define your truth. We live in a world where people are constantly explaining themselves. Every choice, every action, every opinion seems to demand justification. You post something online and someone disagrees. You make a decision for your own life and suddenly people want to know why. And because we're wired to want approval, we start explaining, clarifying, defending. But here's the thing, explanation is not validation. No matter how perfectly you explain yourself, no amount of words can make someone respect you if they've already decided not to. Your worth isn't up for debate, and it never should be placed on the table for others to inspect. Clans. When you constantly explain yourself, you're really asking for permission. Permission to be who you already are. You're saying, I hope this makes sense to you, when you should be saying, this makes sense to me. You start to live reactively, adjusting your truth to fit the comfort level of others. But the more you explain, the more you condition people to expect it. You train them to think they deserve an explanation for your boundaries, your goals, or your peace. That's how you slowly lose your sense of authority over your own life. Velen is an inside job. When you depend on others to understand your intentions before you feel secure in them, you give them power over your emotions. You start chasing their understanding as if it were oxygen. And the harder you try to make people see your point of view, the less they actually listen. Because people don't hear explanations when they've already made up their mind. They hear justification, and justification always sounds like weakness. True confidence doesn't ask for understanding. It lives in truth, whether anyone claps for it or not. Though there's a fine line between communication and convincing. Communication is calm. It's clear, it's grounded in self-awareness. Convincing, on the other hand, comes from fear. The fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being disliked, the fear of being alone in your perspective. But not everyone needs to understand you. Not everyone is meant to walk with you. And when you stop explaining, you give yourself permission to stop managing other people's comfort. You stop wasting time trying to make them comfortable with choices that weren't theirs to make in the first place. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your growth, for your healing, for your peace. The more you evolve, the more some people will misunderstand you. They'll label your distance as arrogance, your boundaries as coldness, your silence as pride. That's okay. People see others through the lens of their own insecurity. You're not responsible for cleaning that lens for them. You're responsible for staying true to what's right for you. When you try too hard to explain, you dilute your own message. You start editing your truth so it doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. But real strength is in standing firm even when people don't get it. Benius. Sometimes explanations come from a place of guilt. You feel bad for saying no, so you try to soften it. You feel bad for changing, so you try to make it make sense for those still stuck in the past version of you. But your growth doesn't need to be explained to people who benefited from your smaller self. You don't have to justify outgrowing relationships, habits, or environments that no longer serve you. You can simply walk away knowing that your peace is reason enough. People often confuse validation with connection. They think that if others agree with them, it means they belong. But belonging that requires constant explanation isn't belonging. It's negotiation. You shouldn't have to negotiate your worth, your values, or your direction just to maintain acceptance. Real connection doesn't demand that you shrink yourself into someone else's comfort zone. It celebrates you for standing in your own. When you stop explaining yourself, something shifts inside you. You start realizing that understanding is not a prerequisite for respect. You begin to see that your responsibility is to be honest, not to be approved. You start speaking less to prove and more to express. And with every moment you choose silence over explaining, you teach yourself that your truth can stand on its own. There will always be people who misunderstand your motives. They'll fill in the gaps of your silence with their own assumptions. Let them. That's their story, not yours. Because when you keep explaining, you're not really clarifying for them. You're trying to protect yourself from being judged. But judgment is inevitable. No matter what you say or do, someone will always have something to say about it. Once you accept that, you stop chasing approval and start prioritizing peace. The moment you detach your self-worth from other people's understanding, you free yourself. You no longer wait for permission to take the next step, to make a change, or to live in alignment with your truth. You realize that explanations don't create validation. They only highlight where you still feel the need for it. And when you no longer need to be understood to feel whole, you finally start living from a place of quiet. Silence speaks louder than arguments because it carries a kind of strength that words can't always match. In a world that constantly demands reactions, silence has become a rare form of power. When people throw criticism, accusations, or negativity your way, the easiest thing to do is to react. You want to defend yourself, explain, or fight back. But every time you respond out of emotion, you give away your peace. You let someone else dictate the tone of your story. Silence, on the other hand, is not about weakness. It's about understanding that not every attack deserves attention, and not every question deserves an answer. It's the ability to stay calm when your ego is screaming for a reaction. Bland. When you choose silence, you're not saying you agree. You're saying you value your energy more than the argument. There's a deep kind of confidence in restraint. Anyone can speak out of anger. It takes real self-control to stay quiet when you know you could destroy someone with words. Silence is maturity in motion. It's understanding that your peace is more valuable than being right. The truth doesn't need to shout to be real. It simply exists. And over time, it always finds its way to the surface. Arguments are fueled by emotion. They thrive on the need to be heard, to be validated, to win. But when you step back and stay silent, the argument loses oxygen. You stop feeding the fire. You make the other person question their own energy because silence exposes things words can hide. When someone's yelling and you remain calm, the contrast becomes powerful. Your stillness magnifies their chaos. It shows where the real control lies. Silence also creates space for reflection. When you stop reacting immediately, you give yourself the chance to process. You can observe the situation without being trapped by it. You start to see people's intentions more clearly. You notice patterns, motives, insecurities. You start realizing that most arguments aren't even about you. They're about what's unresolved within them. Silence helps you separate what's personal from what's projection. And that understanding gives you emotional freedom. There's a difference between silence that suppresses and silence that empowers. Suppressive silence comes from fear, when you hold your tongue because you're afraid to speak up. Empowered silence, though, comes from confidence. It's when you know you could speak, but you choose not to because it wouldn't serve any purpose. It's a decision made from clarity, not from fear. You learn that not everything requires a response. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is no move at all. People often misunderstand silence. They mistake it for surrender. But silence doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've chosen not to engage on their level. You've chosen peace over pride. You've chosen control over chaos. And that's a choice most people can't make because it requires emotional discipline. It's easy to lash out when you're hurt. It's easy to defend yourself when you're misunderstood. But true strength is staying still in the storm, trusting that the storm will pass without your participation. It also carries mystery. It leaves people wondering what you're thinking, how much you know, what you'll do next. It puts the power back in your hands. When you're silent, others have to guess. They can't predict you, and unpredictability commands respect. People can argue with your words, twist them, misinterpret them, but they can't argue with your silence. It leaves them with nothing to fight against. Silence gives you control over timing. Not every truth needs to be said right away. Sometimes waiting, observing, and letting time unfold says more than any speech could. It gives you perspective and authority over your own narrative. You're not rushed, you're not reactive, you're intentional. And intention is where real influence is born. When you master silence, you start to see how much noise people create out of insecurity. They talk to fill the space because silence makes them uncomfortable. It exposes what's underneath. People who are at peace don't need to fill every moment with words. They're comfortable in stillness because they trust themselves. They know that silence doesn't need to be explained. It speaks its own language. Silence also teaches patience. It helps you understand that not every battle needs to be fought immediately. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let time do the talking. Truth doesn't disappear just because you don't defend it in the moment. It grows stronger in the quiet. Silence gives truth the room to echo without interference. Choosing silence in a noisy world is an act of rebellion. It's saying, I don't need to participate in chaos to prove I exist. It's recognizing that peace is louder than pride, that calmness carries more weight than shouting ever could. Silence is where clarity lives. It's where strength regenerates. It's where you remember that your voice has power, but that power doesn't always need to be used to be felt. Let truth reveal itself because time always exposes what words cannot. In moments of conflict or misunderstanding, the desire to defend yourself can feel overwhelming. You want people to see your side, to recognize your intentions, to know you're not what they say you are. But forcing the truth rarely works. The harder you try to convince others, the more it looks like you're hiding something. Real truth doesn't need to chase anyone. It simply stands still and lets time do the revealing. The people who are meant to see it will when they're ready. And truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deeply someone tries to bury it. Lies are temporary, but truth is patient. It doesn't argue. It doesn't beg to be believed. It waits quietly until the noise fades, and then it stands clear. That's why it's so important to stay calm when you're being misunderstood. Your reaction can either amplify the chaos or allow clarity to emerge naturally. The more you push, the more you interfere with the process. But when you trust time, you give space for perspective to settle. You allow evidence, consistency, and reality to do the talking for you. People may twist your words, question your motives, or misjudge your actions, but time always reveals patterns. You don't need to rush to explain who you are, because who you are will eventually show itself through your behavior. Consistency is the loudest form of truth there is. You can't fake authenticity forever. So instead of wasting energy trying to make others believe you, put that energy into living in alignment with your values. Let your actions become the proof. Let time carry your story instead of your tongue. When you stop trying to prove the truth, you regain control of your emotions. You start moving from reaction to observation. You begin to understand that truth doesn't need defense. It only needs patience. People who are quick to justify themselves often feel a deep need to be understood, but those who are at peace with truth don't chase understanding. They trust that clarity will come because it always does. You don't need to rush justice, validation, or recognition. All of it unfolds when the noise dies down and the facts remain. There's something powerful about watching time separate truth from illusion. It happens quietly. The lies start to collapse under their own weight. The people who doubted you begin to see what they couldn't before. The ones who spoke against you start to contradict themselves. And you? You're still standing, not because you fought every battle, but because you chose to stay consistent. The truth always aligns with consistency. It never needs theatrics to survive. Letting truth reveal itself requires emotional maturity. It means sitting in the discomfort of being misunderstood without trying to control every narrative. That's not easy. It hurts to be misjudged, especially when your intentions were good, but that's where faith in yourself comes in. It's the belief that time will show what's real, even if you can't prove it right now. And it always does, because lies decay over time while truth stays intact. Lies depend on constant maintenance. Truth requires none. When you let truth unfold naturally, you protect your peace. You stop trying to manage other people's perceptions, and instead you focus on alignment between what you say, what you do, and who you are. Over time, that alignment becomes undeniable. People may question you in the short term, but in the long run, your consistency earns respect. Those who once doubted you will see that your silence wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Truth also reveals character, yours and theirs. When you choose to stay calm and not retaliate, you give people the opportunity to reveal who they truly are. The ones who spread rumors or distort your image will eventually show their motives through their actions. The ones who truly know you won't need convincing. They'll see the difference between noise and authenticity. That's how truth filters relationships. It shows you who's real and who only believed you when it was convenient. Bandis. It's important to remember that truth doesn't need to hurry. It's not in competition with lies. Lies run fast because they need attention to survive, but truth moves slowly because it's steady and unshakable. It can afford to wait, and while it waits, it gathers power. Every day that passes, the gap between illusion and reality widens. Eventually, the truth becomes so clear that even those who ignored it can't look away. Lance, when you stop defending yourself and let truth reveal itself, you start living from a place of quiet strength. You stop trying to control outcomes and start trusting the process. Time becomes your ally instead of your enemy. You realize that your reputation doesn't need to be protected through arguments. It needs to be protected through integrity. You learn that truth doesn't demand to be believed immediately. It simply requires you to keep living it until it becomes impossible to deny. Choosing peace over proving is one of the hardest lessons to dot learn because the urge to prove yourself feels almost instinctive. When someone challenges your worth, disrespects you, or misunderstands your intentions, you feel that pull to set the record straight. You want to show them they're wrong, that they don't see the full picture. But proving yourself is like chasing a moving target. The more you try, the further it goes. Peace, on the other hand, doesn't chase. It stands still, calm, and self-assured. Choosing peace means deciding that your inner calm matters more than someone else's opinion of you. Janst, when you live to prove yourself, you hand over control of your happiness. You start measuring your value through the reactions of others. You begin performing instead of living. Every achievement becomes a defense, every explanation a plea for validation. It's exhausting because no matter how much you prove, it's never enough for those who are determined not to see you. Peace frees you from that cycle. It reminds you that your worth is not up for negotiation. You don't need to perform to be seen. You need to believe in your own stability even when no one acknowledges it. Peace is quiet strength. It's walking away from an argument not because you can't win it, but because you know winning it would cost you your calm. It's it's understanding that sometimes silence doesn't mean defeat. It means discipline. When you choose peace, you're choosing yourself over your ego. You're saying, my energy is too valuable to be spent on battles that didn't build me. That kind of clarity doesn't come easily. It comes from experience, from realizing that not every disagreement deserves your participation. Proving yourself often feels good in the moment because it feeds the ego. You get that short burst of satisfaction from being right, but that satisfaction is temporary. It fades and you're left drained, frustrated, and still misunderstood. Peace works differently. It doesn't feed the ego, it nurtures the soul. It gives you a sense of quiet confidence that doesn't need confirmation. Mm. It lets you walk through conflict with grace instead of aggression. And while proving seeks control, peace is control. There's also a deeper truth to choosing peace. It protects your focus. Every time you try to prove yourself, you get pulled into distractions. You start living in reaction instead of intention. Your attention shifts from growth to defense, from creating to explaining. But when you stay at peace, your focus remains forward. You don't waste time on what people think, you invest time in becoming better. The irony is, when you stop trying to prove yourself and start focusing on your growth, the results become your proof. People start to see what words could never explain. Choosing peace doesn't mean you avoid conflict or stay silent when you should speak up. It means you know when to engage and when to step back. It's the wisdom to know that not every truth needs to be spoken immediately, and not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Sometimes peace is saying nothing because you know time and truth will handle what your words can't. It's trusting that staying calm doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. And when you're grounded in peace, you stop seeking closure from people who thrive on chaos. You realize that their misunderstanding is not your problem to fix. Some people are addicted to conflict because it distracts them from facing themselves. When you refuse to engage, you're forcing them to sit with their own discomfort. Your calmness becomes their mirror. It exposes the turbulence they carry inside. That's why peace feels so powerful. It disrupts drama without using force. Band peace also changes the way you see yourself. It gives you perspective. When you stop trying to prove and start choosing calm, you start recognizing how much time you used to spend fighting for things that didn't matter. You start seeing that your worth was never something to be proven. It was something to be protected. You realize that peace is not the absence of noise, it's the ability to stay centered within it. It's the strength to keep your inner world stable, even when the outer world tries to shake it. Friend, there's a quiet kind of power that comes from not reacting. When you can sit in stillness while others are loud, when you can keep your composure while others provoke, you're operating from strength. That's the difference between peace and proving. One seeks attention, the other holds presence. You start to understand that peace doesn't need to be explained or defended. It simply needs to be maintained. Choosing peace over proving means valuing your well-being over your pride. It's knowing that no amount of proving will ever make someone see you clearly if they've already decided not to. It's realizing that peace isn't passive, it's intentional. It's choosing to protect your energy, your focus, and your dignity no matter how loud the world becomes. It's understanding that sometimes the most powerful move isn't to fight harder, but to walk away calmer. Confidence is calm because real strength doesn't need to shout to be seen. The louder someone feels the need to prove themselves, the more likely it is that they're unsure of their own worth. Calmness is the language of those who know who they are. It's the quiet assurance that doesn't demand attention, but commands respect. Confidence doesn't rush, doesn't panic, and doesn't argue. It moves with intention, not impulse. When you're confident, you don't need to defend yourself because your presence already speaks for you. Deigned desperation, on the other hand, is loud. It scrambles to be heard, it overexplains, it overreacts. It tries to fill the silence with words because silence feels like weakness. But confidence knows that silence is not weakness, it's mastery. The calm person doesn't need to convince anyone of anything. They let time, results, and consistency speak on their behalf. They understand that reactions reveal more than words, and control over those reactions is where true power lies. There's a certain peace that comes with being secure in who you are. You stop feeling the need to chase approval or correct every misunderstanding. You realize that people's opinions of you don't define you. Confidence is rooted in self-trust, the belief that you can handle whatever comes your way without losing yourself in the process. When you trust yourself, you stop overcompensating. You stop trying to impress. You stop needing validation. And that's where calmness is born. Mond, co- Confident people don't rush to fill silence because they're not afraid of it. They're comfortable in stillness because they don't equate quiet with absence of control. They understand that composure is not passivity, it's strength under control. Desperation is like a storm, wild and scattered. Confidence is like an ocean, deep and steady. Both have power, but only one knows how to use it wisely. When you're calm, you think clearly, you act with precision, and you carry a presence that speaks louder than any argument could. Calm confidence isn't about pretending not to care. It's about knowing what deserves your care and what doesn't. You choose your battles with clarity instead of emotion. You understand that not every challenge needs your attention, and not every insult deserves a response. Desperation jumps at every opportunity to prove something. Confidence waits for the right moment or chooses to walk away entirely. That restraint doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. It shows you're in control of yourself, not controlled by circumstances. Confidence is also humble. It doesn't need to dominate or prove superiority. It's comfortable letting others have their moment because it knows that someone else's light doesn't dim your own. Desperation competes, but confidence collaborates. It listens more than it speaks because it knows that wisdom often hides in quiet observation. The calm person doesn't feel threatened by noise because they've built stability within themselves. Their validation doesn't come from being right, it comes from being real. Bands. When you operate from desperation, your emotions lead you. You react quickly, you defend impulsively, and you often regret what you say later. But when you move with confidence, you respond instead of react. You take a breath, assess the situation, and act from understanding rather than fear. Calmness gives you that pause, the space between what happens and how you choose to deal with it. In that space, your true character is revealed. That's where power lives, not in control over others, but in control over yourself. Confidence shows up in posture, tone, and timing. It's in the way you look at someone without flinching, the way you speak without rushing, the way you walk into a room without needing to dominate it. Calmness amplifies all of this because it creates presence. You don't need to prove you belong, you simply belong. You carry yourself in a way that tells the world, I know my value, and I don't need you to confirm it. That's what draws respect, not volume or aggression, but steady energy that can't be shaken. Desperation craves immediate validation. It wants to be seen, heard, and praised right now. Confidence plays the long game. It understands that consistency speaks louder than momentary approval. It's patient because it knows its worth won't fade over time. It will only grow. Calmness allows you to stay focused on your journey without getting distracted by the noise. It reminds you that the loudest person in the room isn't always the strongest one. Sometimes it's the one who says the least and observes the most. And the calm kind of confidence also builds trust. People gravitate toward those who are composed because calmness makes others feel safe. When you stay steady under pressure, people recognize reliability in you. They see someone who doesn't crumble, who doesn't get carried away by emotion. That kind of energy commands attention without ever asking for it. It's the difference between trying to be impressive and simply being authentic. Confidence is calm because it's grounded. It doesn't chase acceptance, it embodies it. Desperation, however, comes from fear. The fear of not being enough, the fear of being unseen, the fear of losing control. Calmness erases those fears because it's built on inner certainty. It's knowing that your worth is not dependent on external approval. When you carry that kind of quiet confidence, you don't need to announce your value. It becomes evident in the way you move, speak, and exist.